Hey heroes, week 11. Sorry for the recording. As I mentioned at the beginning of our time together, there are just times that I have no choice but to deliver a recording just because things happen. So I appreciate your patience and understanding. You will be getting this on time. That is my goal, as always, but sometimes my life has other plans. So I just want to start off by saying we have 2 weeks. Yep, 2 more full sessions, but I may send you off a couple of recordings. Those recordings will be just some smaller topics, just because I didn't get a chance to get to all of them. I did learn a lesson. I am coming up pretty close to the time of your exam versus giving you a week or so to study. So I apologize for that. That was totally an error on my part, and I will fix that for the coming section. So if you're watching this after the fact, just know that the spring of 2023 session will have a buffer zone in there for you guys to be able to study. But if you are scrambling and panicking, you can go back onto my YouTube channel and go to the playlist Spring of 2022, and many of the topics are there, and they are the same topics that we're going over now. I just add a little bit more each time, maybe something that somebody told me was on the exam that I didn't cover, but for the most part, if you want to at least get a head start on anything we haven't covered, head on over there. So yeah, there's that. So couple of housekeeping things. As usual, this is the fall 2022 study group. This session ran from July 1st to September 30th. So if you are watching this before September 30th and want to get access to the Google group, then you just need to go to the onscenefirst.com/training/study ENP, register there. You will get access to the last 2 sessions or 1 session, depending on when you register. But since we are still in session till September 30th, you will need to register to get access to the Google group. Now, with that said, if you are finding this after September 30th, 2022, and you want to get access to the Google group documents for the early 2023, so the February dates in 2023, you will need to send me an email and ask for access to the fall 2022 study group. And with that, the next live study group will not be done until January of 2023. That is when I'm going to plan on doing the next live study group. And again, with each study group, I get more and more feedback, and I make some updates and try to add more as we go. Still working on a practice exam. Again, this is something that I do in my spare time, and I am trying desperately to get this over to you as soon as possible. It's very time consuming, and I want to make sure that it's accurate. So it's been a huge undertaking to get that over to you guys, but it is on my list of things to do, and I'm working on it periodically. So there's that. Just want to say thank you to my premier study group sponsor, RapidSOS. As you know, those guys over there have been super supportive of all things that I have accomplished since I left there about 1.5 years ago. But if you have no idea what RapidSOS is up to, please go check out their website, www.rapidsos.com, and let them know I sent you. I also want to say thank you to my study group I'm sorry, for my premier sponsor for my podcast and any type of media things that I do, NGA, Next Generation Advanced. Those folks over there are providing next gen core services, call handling, your end-to-end NG 911 solution. So make sure you pop on over there and say thank you to them. So we're going to go over 911 equipment today. Some of this stuff is basic, beyond basic. Some is, you know, stuff that you may have heard of, you may not have heard of, but nonetheless, we have a pretty full session today. So you're going to get a pretty significant dump of information over the next hour and a half. I'm pretty confident it'll go the hour and a half. So first, our 911 equipment is going to start with Annie and Allie controllers. And the reason why I have the little secret decoder there is because the Annie controller or the Annie Allie controller is going to kind of decipher the information that needs to be sent on over to the 911 center. So Annie Allie controllers mean the standalone components that provide control functions for retrieving and interpreting the Annie and Allie databases. Okay, so the Annie controller is going to snatch up that telephone number. So an Annie controller is installed between the telephone lines and the 911 phone system. This equipment receives the Annie signal from the central office. So if you remember in, you know, just basic 911 functioning, that Annie, the automatic number information, will come from the central office to the 911 center. So the Annie controller controls that. And then the Allie controller provides the access to the name and the address data associated with the telephone number that's calling 911. So the Annie controller is on the way in and the Allie controller is on the way back out to the Allie database. So remember, the phone number is what drives that information to come back from the Allie database. Your Annie and Allie displays, just very simply put, the Annie display is going to display that phone number. So automatic number information is the automatic display at the PSAP of the telephone number associated with the line that called 911. In the 911 call, the PSAP uses that Annie, that phone number, to retrieve the caller's physical address from the Allie database. And then the Allie display, if you remember back when we first started doing this, I referred to it as Big Al and Little Annie. So Little Annie is just the phone number. Big Al is all of the rest of the information that comes back with that query against the Annie, that phone number. So the Allie display is the automatic location information, is the location address along with any other information that has been linked to that particular phone number in the Allie database. System controllers, you're going to find system controllers all over the place. So system controllers control and monitor 911 calls from the controllers to the 911 center. So they're just simple controllers. They control lots of different things, nothing specific here. We are going to talk a little bit more about power supplies in another slide, but the UPS itself, the uninterrupted power supply, provides the ability for attached equipment to continue operating if commercially provided power is interrupted, not to be confused with the generator, which we will go over in just a little bit. ACD environment. So when I was in the 911 center, we were a very small agency. We did not have an ACD call distributor. We only had a couple of workstations, but those that are in much bigger call centers require an ACD, an automated call distributor. So the ACD systems are call routing utilities for incoming calls. and can be evenly, can even be used to route the calls originated by the predictive dialer to the next available agent. So if you're in a center where there's 20 call takers, it is fair that the calls go in, a systematic order. So the automatic call distributor will identify which order those calls will be delivered to which particular call handling solution. So if I was to mark myself not ready, that call would be distributed to the next person based on set criteria. So that's ACD, automated call distributor. And then there is computer telephony integration, CTI. It's a term that can be used to describe any technology that enables computers to interact with telephones. So most of your VoIP type computer system, phone-based solutions. And then the intelligent workstation is computer-based 911 answering position equipment that includes the computer telephony equipment. So the fact that my call handling solution can connect a computer to a phone is the CTI, and the actual intelligent workstation is the computer in which it does so. Customer handling equipment, CHE, also called CPE, depending on where you are from, but our book is referring to customer handling equipment on premise. So that is a given, right? So on premises equipment installed today that we refer to as VoIP enabled. It has the ability to integrate voice and data. Separate anti-alley controllers have been replaced by these systems and incorporate sophisticated ACD, automated call distribution, and computer telephony integration. Okay, so we just learned that on the previous slide. And then the call handling function may reside in a VoIP, MLTS, or equivalent solution. There are also host remote solutions. So this is where the call handling equipment serves multiple PSAPs. The communications circuits connect the PSAP positions of workstation back to the host control. So maybe you have a county agency and there's more than one PSAP in that county, or as in the state of Massachusetts, we have a host system that goes out to 250 or so PSAPs across the state. And then there are times where CADs, recorders, RMS, and mobile data systems may also be hosted remotely. And then call handling as a service. So I just want to point this out if you're looking in the book versus the body of knowledge. So the body of knowledge lists this particular thing as CHAS, call handling as a service. But in your book, in the manual 6.1, it is identified as premise equipment as a service. So don't get confused with that. Just wanted to share that. And basically, this is a cloud-based solution. So this solution is an optional service and is available to any PSAP seeking to migrate from on-site or hosted to a cloud-based solution. You can actually have, in this type of system, you can have on-site backups as long as, in addition to cloud-based at the same time. Totally up to you. The advantage is little to no hardware to manage, minimal software. Updates can be really quick, but the disadvantage is perceived loss of control at the local level. And I have known to hear of companies getting a little angry if you are moving to another cloud-based solution or another solution in general, and they basically can hold your stuff hostage. So just know that that's a possibility with cloud-based stuff. All right, so some additional PSAP equipment, your recording equipment. So this is a way that all communications into the 911 center are logged, and the recordings provided the record of various things in case they are needed for a court case, any type of discovery that's needed. Most lines going into the 911 center are recorded, and they are required to be held for a certain amount of time. As far as the IRRs go, instant recall recorders, they are located at the telecommunicators workstation. And if you've taken any one of my classes, you will know that I am very adamant about playing calls back, because we don't tend to play them back enough, and you may miss some important information that should be relayed to responders. So, I always recommend playing back your abandoned calls, your hang up calls, your TTY calls, any critical call that you may have missed something. So definitely use those IRRs more than we are today. Some PSAPs are also using screen recording, which they use for training purposes, or, for our quality assurance and quality improvement programs. It is good sometimes to see what the method to someone's madness was. So a lot of agencies are bringing in screen recording. And just so you know, the recording can protect both the caller and the call taker, right? Like sometimes it saves our butt. In addition to the unlimited power supply, the UPS, we have another power source. So under power systems, we have electrical generators, which provide power in the event of a commercial power loss. These generators rely on either natural gas, diesel, or gasoline, and making sure that you test them is critical. I know that some of the basic stuff is on here, but CAD, computer-aided dispatch, most PSAPs are utilizing computer-aided dispatch, CAD, for documentation of their call processing and call handling and dispatch process. It is a computerized record of the incidents that are coming into the 911 center, that are processed through the 911 center, either via walk-ins, 911 calls, text messages, etc. Most of our CAD solutions are still server-based, but we do have some folks that are migrating to a CAD in the cloud type system. And they usually interface to some external databases such as NCIC, the Department of Motor Vehicles, or Registry of Motor Vehicles, whatever it is that you call it, where you come from. Record management system. So I'm going to jump down to that last bullet. I did identify that in the book, in the manual, it is referring it to a record management system. However, in the body of knowledge, it is calling this piece of information management information systems, MIS. So if you're looking for MIS in the manual, you're not going to find it. You will find record management systems, your RMS, which is computerized records or reports handled by agencies dispatched from their communication centers. They are often an extension of the CAD, however, not always. I have noticed some agencies using both, like an RMS and a CAD solution, which doesn't make sense to me, but it is what it is. Most RMSs include demographic data and personal data such as name, address, date of birth, social security number, race, ethnicity, history of you know, their crimes and what they've done, any incidents that they're linked to, fingerprints, mugshots, any other related images to that particular person or location. And most of them will hook related data to other systems, okay? So again, it's called Management Information System on the Body of Knowledge, but in the book, it is Record Management Systems. Mobile data systems, also called MDCs or MDTs, mobile data computers, mobile data terminals, etc. These are the units that are in the vehicle that allows the officer to see the calls from dispatch, and with permission, they are often able to access NCIC, FBI records, as well as registry of motor vehicles. They used to be called dumb terminals because they were very limited in what they could do, and they were often slow, but just in case you see that term dumb terminal, it's the one that is in the police car as a mobile unit. They're usually more rugged than traditional laptops. And when we go back to talking about FirstNet, which is a public safety broadband network, a PSBN, these are kind of part of what a PSBN is, a public safety broadband network. It aims to combine both mobile broadband and public safety reliability and ruggedness to that level. Mapping and GIS. I don't love mapping. It just never been one of my favorite things. And I think it's hilarious that I ended up working for a technology company that worked with mapping, but it's definitely something super important in our profession. So mapping and GIS. So graphically seeing the caller's location on a digital map is referred to as our mapping and GIS. Wireless 911 calls require GIS or digital mapping software to properly display the provided latitude and longitude or the identified cell tower. So with the mapping and GIS, which we'll get a little bit further into, it's often combined with AVL, automatic vehicle location services. So AVL works with MDSs, mobile data systems, to allow vehicles to be tracked in the dispatch center and can be also used for dispatching a sector car or a zone car. Some folks actually dispatch on where a vehicle is located versus somebody covering a particular area. I know there's a lot of folks that are doing that as well. Another piece of equipment that is in the 911 center that is really important is the TDD and TTY machines for our deaf and hard of hearing community. These TDD and TTY devices allow for the deaf and hard of hearing community or hearing impaired community to be able to communicate with 911 centers. These can be agencies that are contracted through 911 or standalone machines. So when it comes to utilizing TTY, most of our call handling solutions, because they're computer-based, have the TTY built right into the call handling solution. But many agencies still have the standalone machine in which you need to place the phone receiver into the machine and to challenge the call to see if it is someone that is deaf or hard of hearing, and allow them equal access as you would for anyone. So Title II of the ADA, which I know that you will more than likely see something about the ADA on your exam, speaks to the fact that number one, our deaf and hard of hearing communities need to have equal access, just like everybody else would. In addition, there needs to be self-evaluations done. So the standard that you see there, the APCO NINA ANSI standard, minimum training standard for TTY, TDD use in public safety communication centers, is definitely a document that you'd like to check out, because it talks about the self-evaluation to assure equal access. So in other words, you should be testing at least every 6 months on your use and the folks in your center's use or successful use of TTY. So in Massachusetts, we have the state 911 test program where our 911 center employs those that are deaf and hard of hearing to make test calls into our 911 centers. So they are tested at least 3 times a month, 1 on each shift, to assure that self-evaluation, to make sure that they know how to do it and that our deaf and hard of hearing community has the ability to have equal access. Okay. Through some research recently, based on some work that I'm doing with an agency. One, it mentions it in our manual, but it is also proving to be true that the deaf and hard of hearing community is moving away from the TDD and the TTY services. They're using more relay services and text to 911, and then coming soon, real-time text. This document here that you see there will be listed in your follow-up email. It is a resource that is sent by NINA. It's also listed in the manual to make sure that you are fully aware of the ADA laws as they come, as they pertain to the deaf and hard of hearing community. Net clocks. Time synchronization. So usually a time synchronization is usually referred to as a net clock. It can be used to connect all of your equipment in your 911 center. So you could have it connected to your 911 phone system, as well as your CAD system, as well as your recording systems, to make sure that all times across all planes are accurate and accounted for.
How to access the Emergency Response Data Platform. Any public safety agency can access life-saving emergency data through the RapidSOS Emergency Response Data Platform. There are 2 ways of doing so. RapidSOS Portal is a powerful web-based tool that enables you to manage emergencies and access location and supplemental data for every call in your jurisdiction. Signing up for RapidSOS Portal is easy and only takes a few minutes. In addition to emergency management tools and data, RapidSOS Portal includes a training platform as well as administrative tools to manage user permissions, track usage, and analyze trends in your agency. To learn more and sign up for RapidSOS Portal, please visit rapidsosportal.com. RapidSOS also integrates with every major CAD, CPE, mapping, or other public safety softwares. With an integration, you can receive RapidSOS data through your existing workflow, and you won't need any additional screens, tabs, or windows. To learn more about integrations, visit rapidsos.com/public-safety-partners.
Information systems is 10% of your exam, so about 15 questions or so. So some of the databases that are supporting our 911 center. So a service order input, an SOI. I do recall seeing this as being a familiar term. I just don't know if I remember seeing it in Quizlet or if I remember seeing it in the actual exam. But a service order input is a file of completed service order updates that is sent to the DBMS database. There's another typo. Sorry about that. Database management system by all service providers. So each service provider has to have this particular database. It consists of any additions to any addresses, phone numbers, changes, deletes, unlocks, and migrates, meaning if I'm porting a phone number over from one address to another, etc. They're usually processed in batches, which is concerning a little bit. So if you have to remember, just know that it's a little bit concerning, because if I have 2 errors that I send through in a discrepancy form, they're not going to get done immediately. They're going to get done in batches. And then the information is processed against the MSAG to create records for ALI database. So it's basically double checking. Okay, so it's double checking and making sure that the information is valid against whatever your MSAG is listed in your jurisdiction. And we'll talk about the MSAG in just a second. But I do want to let you know that in the body of knowledge, right under SOI, there is SAG. And I don't know what they mean by SOG. I can't find anything on SOG. I think maybe it might be a typo, because the very next one is MSAG, so which is our MSAG, which we know in a true next-gen environment, an MSAG is not necessary, nor does it exist. But today, it still exists for many folks. So an MSAG is a master street address guide. It is a list of all the address information within a 911 service area. So anytime there is a new street added or a new address is added, they have to be added to this MSAG. In the MSAG, you also have ranges, including the lowest and the highest address number. So I remember in my center, if somebody was going to build a house and they had a new phone attached to it, they would request, so that information would come over to us, whether it was from the database, and they would say, you know, we have an address going in at 100 New Bedford Road, but your MSAG only goes up to 96. So then we would have to, as a 911 coordinator or administrator, we would have to extend that range. Okay, so the elements include the low and high address numbers, the street name, you know, road, street, Ave, whatever. If it's north, south, east, and west, if it's a directional notification, the community, the state, and the ESN, emergency service number, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. ALI records are a result of processing data extracted from the customer service record against the MSAG and the ALI database, right? So it's just cross-checking in all of these places. This database contains the records content that is displayed on the 911 equipment when the 911 call is received. Okay, so a record is MSAG valid if there are no discrepancies, which we know that there happen to be discrepancies, and we need to get better at using our discrepancy forms. So the SRDB, I do recall seeing that acronym before. So that's the selective router database. But right now we're talking about the selective router systems records. These records comprise another database produced as a result of customer service records being processed against the MSAG. These records are sent to the selective router database. In other words, they turn the ALI information into an emergency service number. And again, I'll talk about that in just a couple of minutes, but the ESN is what drives where that call is going to go to. So if you remember, the selective router is going to determine where the call goes. It's going to determine where the call goes based on the ESN that is attached to that particular alley information. And then I just want you to remember that the phase 2 component, so the biggest change with phase 2 wireless was the ability to selectively route and get your alley information. So if you think of anything with the selective router, it's usually going to be married to the alley information. An emergency service number. Okay, so on the next page, we talk about emergency. I'm going to go this way. I'm going to do this first. So emergency service zones is a geographical area that represents a unique combination of emergency services agencies, law enforcement, fire, EMS, that is within a specified 911 governing authority's jurisdiction. So if I am in Acme City, and that is my emergency service zone, then I'm going to base the EMS responses based on emergency service numbers. So an emergency service number is a 3 to 5 digit number that represents one or more emergency service zones. So an ESN is defined as one of 2 types. There's an administrative one and there is a routing ESN. So that selective routing system, the SRS, utilizes the SRDV, selecting routing database, to turn the alley into an ESN. That ESN, for routing purposes, will determine which agency that call goes to. In addition to, the administrative part of the ESN also facilitates which public safety agency is going to respond or is going to be utilized. And I just want to give you an example of that. So in the town of Rochester, where I used to live, we were a basic life support service. And whenever a certain criteria was met through EMD, my telecommunicators had to notify mutual aid advanced life support, ALS. And so to make it easier on them to make the decision as to which paramedic service to use, so think of the town being split in half. If the calls were on this side of the town and fell into these particular streets and addresses, then underneath where it says, here you can see Town of Rochester, you can see the PSAP is the Regional Old Colony Communication Center. And then the police services Rochester, the fire services Rochester. But in this particular call, the ambulance service is listed as Freetown Rescue. So this is actually held true even when my communication center went to a regional center. But what I did was I requested 2 ESN numbers. So what that meant is my emergency service zone, the town of Rochester, had 2 ESN numbers. So the ESN numbers first routed the call to the Rochester Communication Center, but then the administrative feature would list that ambulance service as, if it falls on this side of the line, it is Freetown's Rescue that we call for mutual aid for our ambulance. And then if it was on this side of the line in this ESN number, we would call for Wareham. So 2 totally different ESN numbers within the same ESZ, emergency service zone. An E911 relational database scheme. There are several databases required to make the 911 call work as planned, which we know there's all kinds of different databases. But simply put, it is the building of the relationship that allows the MSAG, the Annie, and the Allie to interact with each other. So the E911 relational database scheme, it's just, you know, think of it as a theme on PowerPoint, right? All the slides work together. It's the same exact thing. So a scheme allows us to do the same thing in different places. E911 record creation, okay? It has listed here, the chart on the next page illustrates how the database interacts. It's not in this presentation, but it will be in your PDF copy. So we want to talk a little bit more about geographic information systems, GIS. GIS is a system for capturing, storing, displaying, analyzing, and managing data and associated attributes, which are spatially referenced. So I do know for a fact that on my exam, there was questions on latitude and longitude. So I highly recommend you know the difference between latitude and longitude as in relation to which direction it runs, east and west versus north and south, and the corresponding letters that go with it. So with that, latitude, longitude, coordinates, basically, this is how it rolls. So latitude runs east and west, and longitude runs north and south. So this is just two little things that I will give you. Now, there's a bazillion ways to remember these, but this is what I learned, and it helped me when I took my exam, and it's so silly. A lot of times, folks don't know how to state the phrase. So I want you to think of the next two letters. So they both begin with L, and then the next two letters are in alphabetical order. So latitude, longitude. So if you are verbalizing, can I have your latitude, longitude? Can I have the lat long? It's the words are in alphabetical order. However, the letters are not. So if you had to visualize, so lat, long, so alphabetical A and O, and then you know it's X, Y, but the letters are not in order. So words are in alphabetical order, lat, long, but the letters are not. So it's Y, X, okay? Now, if you need to remember which way they run, so if I think of latitude, I'm from Massachusetts, we climb a ladder, right? So ladder, think of a ladder. So when you first think of the rungs of a ladder, latitude, they run east and west. So the rungs of a ladder, latitude, east and west, rungs of a ladder, latitude. Rungs of a ladder, latitude, they run east and west. And then the long poles on either side are longitude. The long poles are longitude, and they run north and south. So if that helps you, great. If not, you definitely want to figure out which way, which one runs, because I know that there were a couple of questions at least on my exam. So GPS is Global Positioning System. It's one of the global navigation satellite systems, GNSS, that provides geolocation and time information to a GPS receiver anywhere on or near Earth where there is an unobstructed line of sight to 4 or more GPS satellites. So that's where a lot of folks get confused, is they think that phase 2 is automatically GPS, and it's not. I'm sitting in a hotel room right now, and if I was to place a 911 call, there's a high likelihood it's going to triangulate off of towers, and it's not going to use GPS because they don't have an unobstructed line of sight to the GPS. The GIS data model is a mathematical construct for representing geographic objects or surface data. So geocoding. This was the term I learned with RapidSOS, because to me, I never really had, a need for understanding what geocoding is, but basically geocoding is the assigning of a latitude and a longitude to an address. And reverse geocoding is the process of assigning an address to a latitude and longitude. So remember, latitude, longitude, latitude first, longitude second, X, Y is the logical order, but that's not the way it is. So latitude, Y, longitude, X, and the latitude, rungs of a ladder, east and west, longitude, the long poles, north and south. But when we talk about reverse geocoding, when it comes to our 911 systems or things like the RapidSOS portal, you have to understand they are estimated. Most of your reverse geocoding is estimated. There's absolutely no way to have an exact, precise address. While many of them are spot on, they are estimated, and most of the time it will say that. So geocoding is the assigning of a latitude and longitude of an address, and reverse geocoding is giving the address to the latitude and longitude. There are a couple other databases that support 911. So some third-party databases, and what would be considered a third-party database, anything that is outside of the 911 system. So the example that I'm using here is the NENA Enhanced PSAP Registry and Census, the EPRC. If you don't know what the EPRC is, I highly recommend you Google NENA EPRC or NENA Enhanced PSAP Registry and Census. It gives you access as a director or as a frontline user, telecommunicator supervisor, to be able to identify which agencies serve what areas, their 24/7 phone numbers, their mailing address, their emergency contact, or their director's name, etc. So there are two accounts that you can access. So one, if you're a director, you can request editing capabilities. So you would email them at the email eprc_support@geo-com.com. Okay. Oh, maybe. Oh, that's if you already have them. Sorry about that. But if you Google, if you Google the NENA EPRC and go to that website, it'll list how to get access to both as a director or as a frontline telecommunicator. As a frontline telecommunicator, you don't have to have somebody sign off on you. You can request access. You're just going to have to list what agency you work with. And if you are a director, get ahead of it before your folks ask for it. You get in there, make sure that all of your contact information is accurate. And if you are a regional agency, list all of the agencies that fall under your jurisdiction. So if I'm in Rochester, Mass, and I need to find, or I need to manually transfer a call to Hoboken, New Jersey, I can just type in Hoboken, New Jersey, and I should be able to get a current 24/7 number to transfer that call to. The other thing that you will see, because I've gotten a few folks that have reached back on and told me that the NIEM, National Information Exchange Model, is on the exam. To what extent, I'm not 100% sure, But this is the general understanding of what the National Information Exchange model is. Think about it this way. We have a lot of different languages, right? And if we were to have one database, the things that I may call, like, so I know it's kind of hard to see on here, but you can see it when I send the PDF. But in this one, so one place calls it a last name. Another place calls it, so organization A calls it a last name, organization B calls it a surname, and then organization C calls it a family name. So what the NIEM does is it takes all of these terms and it puts it into one category. So if we had to share data across platforms, everything in those categories would fall under another category. So a common vocabulary that enables efficient information exchange across diverse public and private organizations. So here's just a little bit more information. And if you do want more information, you can check out that website there, NIEM.gov. NINA intends for its data structure to be NIEM conformant where applicable. The vision is to be the best practice by choice for intergovernmental information exchange. So they want to be on the same page, right? So instead of us trying to figure out what this is called where, it's all falling under one particular category. Another database that is in support of 911 is the MPAC, which is Number Portability Administration Center. The Number Portability Administration Center is a function of the Federal Communications Commission in the United States, so the FCC. So if you ever ported a number from one carrier to the next, these are the folks that kind of oversee that. So ported telephone numbers, data administration, service provider network administration, and audit administration. When there's mass changes that need to be taken, like such as an area code split, it's done through the MPAC, and then billing and cost appointment. So database development and implementation and maintenance. So a lot of these databases that we've referred to, they're located in many different places. So number one, maybe the telco houses it. They might be self-maintained at the PSAP. They might be standalone at the PSAP via the telco, or they may be individually provided or maintained like the NINA EPRC. I'm not going to go into this in depth because you can read it on the screen, but what I want you to remember, what I think makes logical sense is this is the E911 Annie Alley inquiry process. Okay, so this is kind of like the beginning stages until the end stages. So this is if you were to be building a system from the ground up. So say a city popped up, a town popped up. This is what they have to go through to create, maintain, check, finalize, all of that. But if there was a question that was to ask the logical order, just review this logical order. So phase one, emergency service zone definition, boundaries. We need to build the place that we're going to be building the system, right? So that has to be first. MSAG creation and validation process. So once we've built the city, we now have to build and maintain the roads and the addresses that are going to fall into that category. And then we have to check and validate that to make sure that they're appropriate. If they're not appropriate, if we have run into errors, because humans make errors, then we would need to have a discrepancy process. Once we have the discrepancy process, they would finalize it, establish it, and have an ongoing process for filing those discrepancies. They would update based on any of the discrepancies. They would do a mass update. Remember, I said before that they do it in batches. They would have a mass update. And then before we were able to totally cut it over, there has to be system training, testing, and then a public cutover. So it's a logical process. I don't think you need to memorize each piece of the process, but just be able to identify the process if they were not put in order. Annie and Allie investigative reference notes. So there's a couple of things in this section that you should know what these types of calls are. So an anonymous call. This is when a 10-digit number calls 911 directly. There are 10-digit numbers that are attached to your 911 trunks. And basically what happens is if somebody accidentally dials that number, it will come in right into your 911 system, and you won't necessarily see any information on the screen whatsoever. It might not come in. You might see just a phone number under a caller ID. But why this happens is because your service providers, while they try to assign numbers that are not used ever to 911, it doesn't always happen that way. So somebody may accidentally dial a number that belonged to somebody a long time ago, or they may fat finger a key and they've dialed the number incorrectly, and it just dials through to your 911 system. I do want to make reference. I think this did happen one time. And it was a hoax call. And I think somebody was trying to scam somebody else. And when they reached 911, they, because there was nothing on the Alley screen, we don't know where the call came from. It came in on the alternate emergency line. It was untraceable. So there were so many variables that had to do with this. And just think about it for a second. I'm assuming this anonymous caller who decided to hoax my dispatcher and I this particular day accidentally dialed into the 911 system on a 10-digit line. No display. Simply put, there's no display. There's nothing. It is not the same as a no record found. It's no display. So chances are the situation that I just described in an anonymous caller is one of those situations. Now you're no record found. A no record found comes in for various reasons. There could be an issue along the service line, or there was a recent change to their phone service. But nonetheless, if you've listened to me once, you've heard me say 1,000 times the importance of discrepancy forms and figuring out why something happens. No record found should be identified as some type of discrepancy. And here is I'm going to give you some proof here, and then I'll go back to that slide. Sorry, it's out of order. This is an agency in Kentucky, this call and this call. These were back-to-back calls. And as you can see there on the Alley screen over here on the left side, it gives an N number plan, a PNE number, and it says no record found. But as you can see on the RapidSOS portal, this was a moving target. This was a call in motion, and there was an actual phone number and a location attached to this device. And that says that there is a reason why that phone call did not go through the system the way that it should have gone through the system, and that there's a problem. So we got to figure out why. And then, so this first one was an erratic operator, and this second one was a medical emergency. So these were back-to-back calls. You can see the PNEs are different numbers, but you can also see that there's actual valid phone information. So the phone was working fine. The operating system was working fine. There was something along the network that prevented that information from coming in. So we don't just settle. You have to figure out why it is doing that, right? So discrepancy form. Dual service is a service offering that supplies the same dial tone. So the same phone number to two different addresses. usually when you're transferring a phone to a new location. Okay, here's where the problem lies. I don't think we see this happening as much as it used to. I don't think folks realize the ramifications, but think about somebody who's moving, right? So we moved from one street to another street in the same town. We moved our phone from that location over there. There was a short period of time where if you dialed our home phone number, it would ring in both places. But the problem here is if we picked up the phone and dialed 911, only the new address would appear. So really important that folks are aware of that. Okay, but that's what a dual service is. So non-voice communications is another section. We're going to talk just a little bit about telematics. We're starting to see more and more about telematics these days. It is the mechanism that support the acquisition of telemetry data and actions based upon it. So telemetry is a technology that allows the remote measurement and reporting of information of interest to a system designer or operator. Doctor monitoring pacemaker functionality is a form of telemetry. Think of Johnny Gage and Roy DeSoto on the front yard of a patient's when they go to a call with chest pain, and they would call Rampart and they would pick up the phone and send a strip over the phone waves, and that was telemetry. So taking any type of data and sending it through the air waves to get to its determined destination. Text messaging, SMS, short message service. So NG911 in its final state supports text 911, but requires NENA I3 emergency services IP network and ESINet and connected PSAPs that are capable of receiving IP-based signal and media. While the transition to NG911 is making progress, there is a push to enable text 911 before NG911. So what does that mean? We're using over-the-top solutions, which is SMS interim text messaging. So it's in the interim until we get full NENA I3 compliant ESINet phone systems in place. So the SMS interim is a temporary solution to allow text 911 in their communities before the I3 ESINet and IP phone systems have been made available to them. The session can be initiated when the caller uses the single code 911 to text 911. If the area does not accept text, the texter will receive a bounce back message. And right now, through text to 911, photos, video, and multi-recipients are not supported. The TCC is the Text Control Center. It was introduced to support the interim text to 911 solution. So if somebody dials text to 911, it's got to go someplace first. Because if you think about when we first started the wireless thing, we had no way to deliver those calls. And so they created this makeshift way for it to get to the 911 center. They're doing the same thing for text 911 through a TCC, Text Control Center. It is the interface between the text user's carrier and the PSAP. Text messages sent to 911 route to a TCC that queries the location server, LS, in the originating wireless network. So if you have text 911, you can see that there are different locations through your phone system for text 911 than a regular wireless call. It's not the same wireless phase 1 and phase 2 for text messaging. And that is why I always recommend the RapidSOS portal, because again, the location there is coming from the operating system on the device. It's not relying on a TCC. Okay. So right now, there are 3 ways a non-I3 PSAP can receive that delivered text. One is through the I3 IP network. through a TTY gateway or a web service or web portal. So some folks that have text 911, when they engage the text 911, it will open up the TTY. Real-time text. In 2016, the FCC adopted a report and order that amended rules to allow IP-based wireless carriers to provide RTT in lieu of TTY. RTT allows consumer to send and receive text characters as they are typed, as well as other simultaneous data. The availability of information at the same exact time that it's occurring, that could be very dangerous. Most phones right now, you can enable a RTT, real-time text, on your device, but not everybody can receive it. So just know that we're not there yet per se, but it is something that is really being pushed by the deaf and hard of hearing community to be able to have that kind of real-time conversation, just like they would if they were communicating verbally. The PSAP's ability to receive RTT depends on the technological capabilities. If it's a true NG 911 solution, then chances are they should be able to receive it. But again, we're not seeing that in many places today. Once the PSAP is capable of receiving RTT, they must submit the request to the carriers. Now, if you think about back when wireless first came out, so when wireless phase 1 was available, you had to tell the carriers that you were ready to receive it and that you were able to get those wireless calls. Same with wireless phase 2. They had dates. I don't remember exactly what the dates were, but they had dates that if you were going to accept it, you would be having to notify the carrier that you're able to accept that information. Multimedia is a form of communication that combines different content such as text, audio, images, animations, or video into a single presentation, in contrast to traditional mass media such as printed material or audio recordings. I do have prepared up here because they are definitely in the game these days for sharing multimedia, and they're doing it the right way, having the ability to say yes or no as to whether or not you want to access either the camera. If somebody does show something you don't want to see, you can blur it out. If you have not heard what Prepared is doing, I highly recommend you reach out and check it out. Two things. Number one, it's free. So there's that. And number two, you can access it right through the RapidSOS portal. And yeah, they're doing some pretty cool things. So you definitely should check that out. Email. Okay. I don't think I need to define what email is. Social media networking. I don't think I really need to get into that description. You can study that on your own. Device application, apps. Okay, so we know that there are a ton of apps out there. Application, you know, there's a ton of applications out there that are device application apps that are claiming to call 911. The biggest thing here is I want you to stay up on, you know, which apps are claiming, how they're claiming it. Whenever I see a new app claiming to call 911, I will dissect it. I will test it. I'll call my 911 center and say, hey, I got to test some apps that are claiming to call 911 because claiming to call 911 and going to a call center and delivering the information to 911 are two very different things. Just some information network stuff. And a couple other things. First, internet. So our internet is a network of networks that consists of private, public, academic, business, government networks of local and global scope linked by a broad array of electric, wireless, and optical network technologies. I think you know what the internet is, but the intranet is a local or restricted communication network, especially private network created using the World Wide Web, the WWW. So At RapidSOS, we had an intranet. In the town of Rochester, we had an intranet. That meant that we had a place where we could gather, that it wasn't necessarily accessible. I say necessarily because hackers can get in anywhere, but it was something specific to our town or to our company. Maybe your organization has that as well. A LAN, a local area network, is a transmission network encompassing a limited area, such as a single building or several buildings in close proximity. Again, our intranet was on a LAN. The LAN was also used between our 911 center and our mobile data terminals. A WAN, a wide area network, is a computer network that spans a relatively large geospatial area and consists of 2 or more interconnected local LANs, and then maybe a college, okay? And then wireless local LAN network, okay? A network that allows devices to connect and communicate wirelessly. So as far as security goes, there's 4 different types of security. So physical security is the protection of the personnel. So having secured areas into your 911 center, the hardware, the software, the networks, the data from physical actions and events that could cause serious loss or damage to an enterprise, agency, or institution. Then there is cybersecurity, which is the practice of defending computers, servers, mobile devices, electronic systems, networks, and data from malicious attacks. If you want to listen to a good podcast, go to my On Scene First with Tracy Eldridge podcast and find the episode with Marty Crum. We talk about when his agency got hit by a ransomware attack. That was some pretty crazy stuff, but they did well getting back up and running. Network security is a set of rules and configurations designed to protect the integrity, confidentiality, and accessibility of computer networks and data sharing, both software and hardware technologies. And then they listed personal security. I'm not sure what they mean by that, but nonetheless. So additionally, under security, we have 2 types of attacks that are listed. So first, telephone denial of service, a TDOS attack, is a telephony denial of service attack as an attempt to make a telephone system unavailable to intended users by preventing incoming or outgoing calls. This happened to my friend's 911 center in Massachusetts. They had somebody who was facilitating the IRS scam get irritated because the police got involved and they were trying to get information from one of the residents in their town. And the scammers ultimately launched a TDOS attack, telephone denial of service attack, onto their 911 system and their their agency phones. I have no idea how they did it, but within milliseconds, they had locked up all of their phone systems by robo-dialing and continuously calling. So regular callers weren't actually able to get in. It was crazy. And then an additional type of attack is the DDoS attack. A distributed denial of service is an attack in a malicious attempt to disrupt the normal traffic of a targeted server, service, or network by overwhelming the target or its surrounding infrastructure with a flood of internet traffic. So you have the guy sitting behind the curtain, attacks the system, which in turn it distributes it to many other places on the network. All right. Little bit more to go. These are definitely on the exam. I have I know that I have seen these on here. I don't know. I thoroughly have ways to to fully remember them. But what I do want to do is define first, because we're talking about losses of service and disruption of services. So the disruption of service falls under two different categories. So it's about the equipment and stuff in the center, but it also falls under the management type roles and responsibilities in what you could potentially do when you have a disruption in service. So first, I thought it was important to identify what an alley node is because it comes up a few times in these definitions. So an alley node is a network node that sits at a point in the network where it sends and receives, stores or creates information. It transmits data to communicate with other nodes in the network. That's it. I don't know what it looks like. I think of avoid the noid from a Domino's or pizza commercial. I don't remember which one it was, but that guy, he was all over the place, right? So avoid the noid, and it was like whoop, all over the place. And that's the way that I remember nodes, is that they are all over the place. But again, logically thinking, when you get one of these definitions, just read the definition, read what it's looking for, and logically work back and try to think of an understanding of what it is that it's saying. Okay. So the end office, so we're going to talk about end office, central offices and stuff again. So the end office is a type of central office that connects the telephone customers into the 911 network, but does not directly connect it to the PSAP. So the end office is like over there somewhere. Okay. So full or partial loss of service to the PSAP. Full or partial loss of service to the PSAP is loss of service to the PSAP, which is caused by an interruption or break in the communications link. So if your service is down, there's a break in the link somewhere. Okay. This can cause a full or partial loss to a PSAP as a result of a failure in communication equipment or cutting of the telecommunications cable. So, I don't necessarily know about cutting of the cable, but if somebody's digging and they shouldn't be digging and they have cut a wire, but I'm more thinking when we lost our phone service at the node, at the particular node that supplied our 911 center. We had a huge storm in 2012 and our battery backups and everything was knocked down for several days, but we lost service at one of the nodes. So it affected our 911 calls. It affected us to get that service. So our Comcast node, which was down the street from our center, we had lost power and the battery backups there had depleted themselves. So all of our calls had to go to Marion, to our alternate PSAP. Loss of PSAP facility. If you think about it, many of these, they're exactly what they say. So it results when the facility housing the PSAP is destroyed or so severely damaged from natural or man-made disasters that the PSAP cannot safely continue operations. This can also result from a threat or of an action or from an event that requires evacuation. So here you have the Clackamas County 911 Center had to evacuate because of wildfires. Right? So their agency was being threatened. So they basically lost their PSAP facility, whether it's damage to the facility or threat or damage to the facility. That one's pretty easy. Isolation of the end office. So remember, the end office is that last place before it gets to the PSAP. It occurs when the end office that feeds the 911 system and its communications link to the tandem switch or selective router are broken. In this case, calls from the area served by the end office will not reach the PSAP. Telecommunicators must be relocated to the isolated end office to answer calls to 911, or they can be sent to a location served by that end office that has a 7-digit dialable phone to which 911 calls are redirected. And that's actually what we had to do. But if you think of that isolation of the end office, if there's an issue at the end office, that last place before the call gets into the 911 center, it's an isolated issue. And think about being isolated as a telecommunicator. If you're the one that has to go to the end office to answer the 911 calls that are stuck, they're isolated at this end office over here. More often than not, the calls are being routed somewhere else. We're not going and sitting at the end office and answering calls. But if you want to think about isolation of the end office, pick the person that gets voted off the island, goes to isolation, sits in the end office by themselves, and answers the phone calls and transport them, which we really don't do, but that's the way I'm going to tell you to remember it. Okay. And if these calls are being isolated at the end office, they're not able. So that call, think about it. The call is not going to have any ALI because it is not going, the ANI is not going to be sent into the PSAP, which in turn is sent back to the ALI database to receive that additional information. So at minimum, you are just transferring that call information. So isolation of the end office is when there is a broken issue at the selective router and somebody has to isolate by themselves, go over there and answer the calls. Isolation of the central office. It occurs when the links between the central office and the serving PSAP and the remainder of the communications network are interrupted. In this case, only calls from within the central office area can be redirected to a 7-digit number at the PSAP that operates from the isolated central office. Calls will not route through the 911 tandem switch or selector router, and they will not have any ALI. So isolation of the central office. Central office comes before the end office, okay? And the selective router is what is determining where that call goes. So we haven't even hit the selective router there. This means that if your 911 system contains more than one end office, 911 calls from outside of the central office serving the PSAP will not be completed as expected. They will be rerouted according to your contingency routing plan. So if the call cannot get to you, it is going to be rerouted. And again, these are challenging. You just have to try to figure these out. Now, the end office and the central office, the isolation is just specific to that area, just specific to the network around those. It's isolation of the networks, and the end office and the central office, they're terms that are used interchangeably. But now let's look at this loss of the central office. We've lost the whole office, like the whole building. Okay. So loss of the central office occurs when the communications equipment located in the central office fails as a result of malfunction, water damage, fire, or other causes within the central office. The isolations happen outside the buildings. The loss of is actually in the building or around the building, like the building itself, not around the building, but the actual building itself. All telephone service, including 911, to the area served by the central office is lost. So lost the office. Okay. Aliens came down, pick it up. The facility itself is non-functioning. In this situation, 911 calls must be redirected to the backup PSAP because they're not even going to get into that facility. Okay. Loss of tandem switch or selective router results in the loss of call routing and ANI service. Equipment failure or some catastrophic incident such as fire or damage to the host can cause a loss of tandem switch or selective router. This is why in some 911 systems have dual geography, diverse selective routers capable of carrying full loads. That is one selective router. My spelling is atrocious. I apologize. Is down and the system still functions. So when you think of an isolation of anything, it's the network. If you're thinking of loss, it's a loss. It's a total loss. Okay. Loss of the database management system, the DBMS, can result in failure of any of the computers serving the system or damage to the building housing the data management system. Additionally, interruption of data links between the data system and the alley nodes result in a loss of data transfer. The result is loss of up-to-date alley being delivered to the PSAP. So if you lose your database system, okay, the computers, either you've lost the computer or the facility itself where the system is housed. So again, loss is a physical loss. Isolation is the network. Somewhere you got to isolate where the problem is in the network. Okay. So a loss of the database can happen, but it's often backed up to an extent. So depending on how often it backs up, you may get some data, you may not get all data. Loss of the alley node itself can result in a failure of any of the computers serving the system or damage to the building housing the alley nodes. Additionally, interruption of data links between alley nodes and PSAP, loss of alley query capability. The end result may be the loss of alley being able to be delivered to the PSAPs. And this is, again, the reason why many of them have two geographically diverse alley circuits from different places. So they have that emergency backup. So with that, I know we had a lot of information today. I appreciate you guys. I appreciate your understanding of me having to record, and just be on the lookout for some additional recorded sessions and updates. I'm going to try to get all of this information out to you as soon as possible. So I will see you soon, friends. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, here is my contact information. Make sure you like and follow me on social media. Jump on over and say thanks to RapidSOS and NGA 911 for their support of everything that I do. Check out the podcast On Scene First with Tracy Eldridge. And in the bottom right-hand corner is a private mental health and wellness Facebook group. So if you are in public safety and you want a safe place for mental health and wellness, join us at the On Scene First Safety Net. Stay safe, heroes. Stay strong and stay here. We need you.